My mother's composure was flawless, right up until the moment she told a lie about me. We were all standing inside the exclusive private jet terminal, an environment so sterile it smelled only of new money and expensive leather. My parents, Marcus and Eleanor Sterling, were radiating charm for their most important client, Julian Croft. They were a picture of perfection, as always. Mr. Croft, a man whose casual posture couldn't hide his immense power, turned to my mother and posed an innocent question. "Do you have other children?" My mother, Eleanor, let out a delicate, sorrowful little laugh. It was the laugh she reserved for life's minor tragedies, like a scuffed shoe or a disappointing stock performance. "We have a daughter," she said, her voice laced with a theatrical pity, "but she's just a disappointment. She works at an airport, but she never really managed to go anywhere." My father nodded solemnly, his expression a carefully constructed mask of paternal regret. And it was at that exact moment that my mother's champagne flute, a delicate crystal thing, slipped from her grasp. It met the polished marble floor and didn't just break, it exploded, just like the lie she'd so casually deployed. They were standing in my terminal. They were minutes away from boarding my jet. And the truth, after all these years, was finally cleared for takeoff. Before we get into the whole story, do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop me a comment down below to let me know where you're watching from around the globe. My name is Ava Sterling. I'm 32 years old. To my parents, I was never truly a daughter. I was a press release. My mother, Eleanor, and my father, Marcus, were the founders of Sterling Prestige. It was a high-end consulting firm in Chicago that specialized in making old money families look even better. They were masters of image management, smoothing over scandals and hosting galas where the guests' teeth were as uniformly white as the starched tablecloths. In our home, image wasn't just a priority. It was the only thing that mattered. Affection was a performance, delivered for an audience. I'll never forget when I was 10 and won the state science fair. I sprinted home, my heart hammering against my ribs, clutching the blue ribbon like it was an Olympic gold medal. I found my mother in the living room, meticulously arranging a seating chart for some charity ball. "Mother, I won!" I exclaimed, holding the ribbon out for her to see. She didn't even glance up. "That's nice, dear. Did a photographer from the paper get a picture?" I faltered. I think so." "Good," she said, finally looking at me, but her eyes were focused on straightening the collar of my dress. "Make sure you get me the clipping. Marcus and I are trying to make a good impression on the Vanderbilts. They place a high value on education." She offered a smile, but it wasn't for me. It was for the Vanderbilts. My ribbon wasn't a symbol of my achievement. It was just another piece of social currency for their collection. Our family dinners weren't meals. They were quarterly reviews. We ate in a dining room so vast and cold that our voices echoed. My father would preside from the head of the table, his suit jacket still buttoned. "Ava," he'd begin, his tone not a question, but a test. "Tell me about your calculus midterm." "I got an A," I'd reply, my stomach twisting into a knot. He'd frown. "An A-. Your cousin Daniel at the firm just graduated summa cum laude from Yale?" "An A- is acceptable, Ava." "It is not exceptional." My mother would then chime in. "And what about your posture? I saw you slouching at the yacht club last Sunday." The Cartwrights noticed. Mrs. Cartwright mentioned her daughter is now on the board of the Junior Philharmonic. It was never, "How are you doing?" It was always, "How are you looking?" It was never, "What are you passionate about?" It was always, "What have you accomplished?" So I learned to be quiet. I learned to make myself small, to become invisible. In our house, love was conditional, something you earned like a year-end bonus. If I performed up to their standards, I received a cool pat on the head. If I fell short, I was met with silence. The silence was the worst part. It was a thick, cold fog that would descend upon the house, suffocating everything. I remember one Christmas when I was 16. I had asked for one thing, a telescope. I was desperate to see the stars, to connect with something vast and real, something outside of our perfectly polished, hollow world. That Christmas morning, a small velvet box was waiting for me under the tree. Inside, a diamond necklace sparkled. "It's from Cartier," my mother said, her face beaming. "All the girls in your circle will be utterly envious." Later that day, I found the telescope I'd asked for. It was tucked away in a corner of my father's study, already boxed up. He was giving it to his business partner's son. "It's a better fit for him," my father explained without meeting my eyes. His father is a very important client. I just nodded. I went up to my room and placed the diamond necklace in the back of a drawer. I never wore it. My parents didn't want a daughter. They wanted a brand extension. I was meant to be Sterling Prestige's crowning achievement, the flawless, accomplished, beautiful daughter who would marry into another powerful family and enhance their public profile. But I wasn't a brand. I was just a person. And in our family, that was the one thing you weren't allowed to be. I spent my entire childhood feeling like a ghost haunting my own home. I'd walk through the marble corridors, past the abstract art and the minimalist furniture, and feel an unnerving emptiness. The house wasn't a home. It was a stage, and I was just a background prop. My parents were brilliant architects of image. They constructed a beautiful, glittering cage of expectations, and I was the songbird placed inside. They polished the golden bars and boasted to everyone about how lucky I was to live in it. They never once understood that a cage, no matter how gilded, is still a cage. They would talk about me while I was sitting right there, as if I were a piece of furniture. "She has wonderful hair," my mother would remark to her friends over brunch. "She gets that from my side of the family, but she's so painfully shy. We're working on it." A shy daughter doesn't project the right kind of confidence for the Sterling name. My father was even worse, all business, all the time. "Ava, you must understand the art of networking," he told me relentlessly throughout high school. "Every friend you make is a future contact. Every party you attend is a potential business opportunity. Don't waste your time on people who can't advance your position." I did have one real friend, Maya. Her dad was a mechanic who ran a small garage. She was kind and funny and made me feel like a normal person. My parents found out. "You cannot be seen with that girl, Ava," my mother said, her face taut with a rare, genuine anger. "What will people think? It's embarrassing." They made me end the friendship. They told me she was not our kind of people. I learned to live two lives. The first was the one my parents curated, the quiet, obedient daughter who earned good grades and wore the right designer labels. The second life was the one I kept locked away inside my own mind. It was a lonely existence. I would sit in my perfectly decorated room in our perfectly curated house and feel a deep, profound hollowness. I was surrounded by success, by wealth, by everything the world is told to want. But I had never once felt truly loved, not for who I was, but only for what I represented for them. This was the family that prioritized image over affection. This was the family that would one day call me a disappointment. They had no idea who I really was. They had no clue what I was about to become. They were so consumed with constructing their own flawless image that they never bothered to look at the real person standing right in front of them. They never truly saw me, and that would turn out to be their greatest mistake. It all began with the sky. I was 8 years old, and my father had a meeting with a client at a small private airfield outside of Chicago. I was dragged along, serving my usual role as a prop for the family man closing a deal. I was sitting on a stiff leather sofa in the waiting area, bored out of my mind in an itchy white dress. My mother's final instruction had been to sit perfectly still and touch nothing. Then I heard it, a sound like low, controlled thunder that vibrated through the floor. I jumped up and ran to the window, ignoring my father's sharp, "Ava, stay put." There, on the tarmac, sat a private jet. It was sleek and white, with a bold, dark blue stripe down its side. It wasn't a massive, lumbering airliner. It was compact, powerful, and perfect. It looked like an arrow ready to be shot into the clouds. I watched, mesmerized, as two pilots, both women, walked out and began their pre-flight checks. They moved with a quiet, focused confidence I had never witnessed before. They weren't smiling for anyone. They were working. Then the jet began to move. It rolled down the runway, slowly at first, then gaining speed. The sound grew from a rumble to a roar that filled my entire body. And then it lifted. Effortlessly, it climbed into the vast blue Illinois sky and vanished. I stood at that window for what felt like an eternity. I'd never seen anything so free. That night at dinner, I made a critical error. I spoke my mind. "I saw a jet today," I said. My father just grunted from behind his newspaper. "It was beautiful," I whispered. "I want to fly one day. I want to be a pilot." My mother, who was arranging a new bouquet of lilies on the sideboard, let out that little laugh, the one that wasn't funny, the one that always felt like a tiny cut. "Oh, darling, don't be ridiculous," she said, snipping the head off a lily. "Pilots are just uniformed drivers. They're the help. A Sterling doesn't fly the plane. A Sterling owns the plane." My father finally lowered his paper. "Your mother is right, Ava. You'll go into the family business like me. You will manage assets, not operate them." I looked down at my plate, feeling that familiar cold shame wash over me. I had been silly. I had been wrong. But later that night, alone in my room, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jet gave me, the feeling of it soaring into the sky. It was a feeling of power, of escape. I never mentioned it out loud again, but a spark had been lit. It became my secret. I started to read. I used my allowance to buy magazines, but not the fashion glossies my mother left on the coffee table. I bought aviation magazines, Flying Aviation Week, and I hid them under my mattress. At night, huddled under my blankets with a flashlight, I devoured articles about thrust-to-weight ratios, avionics suites, and the differences between a Gulfstream and a Bombardier. The technical jargon was dense, but I learned it. Those words felt more real to me than any of my mother's seating charts. On my math homework, I stopped doodling flowers and started sketching airplanes. I drew intricate cockpit layouts in the margins of my history notebooks. I could draw a Boeing 747 from memory. My parents saw my grades. They saw the straight A's, but they never saw the sketches. They didn't see the girl who was no longer in the room. She was 35,000 feet in the air, charting a course to somewhere else. My dream wasn't just about flying. It was about control. In my life, everyone else held the controls. My parents dictated what I wore, who I saw, what I was supposed to think. But in the sky, you were in command. It was just you, the machine, and the air. My mother could criticize my posture, and my father could deem my grades unexceptional, but they couldn't touch the sky. When I was 12, My school library was clearing out old books. I found a thick technical manual for a Cessna 172. It was 20 years out of date, but I took it. I smuggled it home in my backpack as if it were stolen treasure. I read that book until the binding cracked and the pages started to fall out. I learned about pre-flight checklists, stall speeds, and navigation. In theory, I knew how to fly a plane before I even knew how to drive a car. My parents' dismissal of my dream didn't crush it. It protected it. Because they considered it a silly, low-class fantasy, they never looked for its traces. Because they thought it was beneath them, they never suspected I was secretly building an entire world they couldn't enter. Their insults became my armor. Their disinterest became my camouflage. When my father accused me of being unfocused, I was actually memorizing the instrument panel of a Learjet. When my mother lamented that I was too quiet, I was actually imagining the radio chatter between a pilot and air traffic control. They thought they were grooming a future consultant. They thought they were polishing a prop for their grand stage. But I was doing something else entirely. I was building a runway. It was the one part of my life that was truly and completely mine. They could control my clothes, my friends, my education. They could take away my telescope, but they could never take away the sky. That 8-year-old girl at the window in the itchy white dress was still there. She was waiting, and she was learning. My defiance wasn't loud or dramatic. I didn't scream or break their rules. My defiance was quiet. It was hidden. It was the soft pencil sketch of a wing. It was the faint glow of a flashlight under my blanket. It was the first spark of a fire, and I guarded it fiercely, keeping it safe in the one place they could never look, inside me. The day my acceptance letter to a prestigious business school arrived, my father had it professionally framed. He hung it in his office right next to a photograph of him shaking hands with the governor. "My daughter following in my footsteps," he announced proudly at a dinner party that night. He placed his heavy hand on my shoulder, and I felt its weight. It wasn't pride, it was ownership. My parents had made it abundantly clear. I would go to business school, get a finance degree, and come home to take a job at Sterling Prestige. My life was a 6-lane highway they had paved for me. I smiled. I nodded. "Thank you, Father. I won't let you down." And in a way, I didn't. I went to business school. I enrolled in the finance program as instructed. But on the first day of registration, I did something for myself. I walked across the sprawling campus to the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. I found the registrar's office and quietly signed up for 3 extra courses as electives: aviation management, aerospace logistics, and air traffic control fundamentals. My parents paid my tuition, but they only ever saw the bill from the business school. They never saw the one for the extra classes. I paid for those myself, using every dollar I'd saved from the generous allowance they gave me, money I was supposed to be spending on sorority dues and designer clothes. For 4 years, I lived a double life. My days were spent in business classes, sitting in cavernous lecture halls, learning about market-driven strategies and portfolio diversification. I took the tests. I got the A's. I did it because it was easy for me. It was just memorization. It was my parents' world, and it was deeply, profoundly boring. But my nights were mine. I would leave the business library and walk over to the engineering building. It was a different universe. The students there didn't wear polo shirts. They had grease under their fingernails and argued passionately about engine designs, not stock prices. I was the only woman in my logistics class, the only finance major in my aviation management course. I was in heaven. I learned about fleet management, scheduling, fueling, maintenance cycles, and the labyrinth of FAA regulations. I was learning the business of flying. My parents had been right about one thing: owning the plane was more powerful than flying it. But they had missed the crucial point. To truly own it, you had to respect it. You had to understand it from the ground up. My favorite class was taught by a man named Professor Miles Corbin. Professor Corbin was the antithesis of my father. He was in his late 60s, wore rumpled tweed jackets, and had spent 20 years in operations at a major airline before a decade at the FAA. He didn't care about my last name or my clothes. He cared about the sky. I sat in the front row of his class every single night. I answered every question. I stayed late to ask him about supply chains for rare aircraft parts and the complexities of international landing rights. One night, as I was the last one to leave, he called out. "Sterling," he said, packing his worn leather briefcase, "you're not like the other business students." My heart stopped. "Sir?" "They're all tourists," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "They're here because they think planes are cool. They want to work in private equity and buy and sell airlines like they're baseball cards. They don't care about the work." He looked directly at me, his eyes sharp and clear. "You care about the work?" he stated simply. "You're in the wrong building. Why are you in the finance program?" I looked down, a wave of that old familiar shame washing over me. My parents, they have a consulting firm. They expect me to join it. Professor Corbin nodded slowly, zipping his briefcase shut. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said the words that would change the course of my life. "They're building a beautiful prison for you, Ava. A very expensive, comfortable prison. But you don't belong in their boardroom." He gestured out the window toward the darkened campus, but I knew he was pointing at the sky. "You belong out there." I felt tears sting my eyes. It was the first time in my life anyone had ever truly seen me. Not the Sterling name, not the prop, not the disappointment. He saw me. "Don't let them ground you, kid," he said with a gruff pat on my shoulder. And then he was gone. Those words became my runway. I worked even harder. I took on a secret internship at a small air cargo company, spending my weekends learning their scheduling software and my spring break learning how to manage a fuel purchasing budget. My parents thought I was at mixers and networking events, and I was, just not with the people they knew. I learned how to write a business plan, not a theoretical one for a class, but a real one. A plan for a luxury private jet company built on precision, safety, and authentic service. A company that would be the polar opposite of my parents' world. No fake smiles, no empty promises, just performance. I named it Apex Air. I wrote it in a password-protected file on my computer, working on it every single night. When I graduated, I did so with 2 educations. The first was the one my father framed, a degree in finance, a piece of paper that said I was a Sterling. The second was the one I had earned in secret, the one I had hidden. It was my real knowledge. It was my business plan. It was my freedom. My parents threw a massive graduation party. All their friends and clients were there. My father raised a champagne glass. "To my daughter, Ava, the newest vice president at Sterling Prestige." Everyone cheered. I smiled and nodded, but I was holding a secret. I knew Professor Corbin was right. I didn't belong in their boardroom. I belonged in the sky, and I was finally ready for takeoff. The Monday after graduation, my father's assistant called. "Mr. Sterling is expecting you at 9 a.m., Miss Sterling. Your office is all set up." I was standing in my old bedroom, which was still painted the pale, lifeless beige my mother had chosen years ago. My suitcases were packed on the bed. "Thank you, Jessica," I said, "but I won't be coming in. Could you please tell my father I'd like to meet him for breakfast instead?" There was a long, confused pause. "Breakfast, Miss Sterling?" "Yes, at the diner on Clark Street, the Greasy Spoon, at 10 a.m. He will not like that, Miss Sterling." "I know," I said, and I hung up the phone. I packed the last of my things. I didn't take much. I left behind the designer clothes, the jewelry, and the girl they thought they had created. I walked into the diner at 10:02 a.m. My father was already there, sitting in a cracked vinyl booth and glaring at his gold watch. He looked like a hawk trapped in a chicken coop. His suit, his watch, his shoes, they were worth more than the entire establishment. He was furious. "You're late," he snapped as I slid into the seat across from him. "I'm not," I said, picking up the laminated menu. The waitress came over. "Just a black coffee," my father said, waving her away with an imperious flick of his wrist. "I'll have the number 3, I said. 2 eggs, bacon, toast, and a coffee." The waitress gave me a warm smile and left. My father stared at me. "What is this, Ava? A childish stunt? Your office is waiting. We have the quarterly reports to review." I put the menu down. "I'm not coming to the firm, Dad." The words hung in the air. The clatter of plates from the kitchen suddenly seemed deafening. He actually laughed, a cold, sharp bark. "Excuse me, what did you just say?" I said, "I'm not coming to the firm. I'm not taking the job." His expression shifted from anger to bafflement, a look I rarely saw on his face. He wasn't in control. "Don't be ridiculous," he said. "This is what we've been planning for 20 years. Your entire education was geared for this. It was your plan, Dad, not mine." The waitress brought our coffees. I took a sip. It was hot, bitter, and real. "So, what is your grand plan?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Are you going to be a bus driver in the sky?" "I'm going to work in aviation, yes," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm taking a job at a regional airline." "At the airport?" He said the word as if it were something vile. "Yes, I'll be in operations. Night shift. It pays $45,000 a year." My father stared at me as if I had just announced I was moving to Mars. Then the anger returned, darker this time. $45,000, he whispered, his voice dangerously low. "I pay my gardener more than that. The job I offered you starts at $250,000 with a bonus." "I don't want it." "This isn't about what you want," he finally yelled. The diner went quiet. He lowered his voice to a furious hiss. "This is about family. This is about our name. What am I supposed to tell people? What do I tell the Vanderbilts? That my daughter, a finance graduate from one of the best schools in the country, is working the night shift at an airport?" My food arrived. I picked up my fork. "You can tell them the truth, Dad. Or you can lie. You're good at that. It's what your company does, isn't it? Manage the image." His face turned a deep, blotchy red. He stood up so abruptly the table shook. He threw a $100 bill on the table. "You are an embarrassment," he seethed. "An embarrassment to the Sterling name. You are throwing away every single thing we have given you." He leaned in close, his voice a venomous whisper. "You are a failure, Ava. A complete and utter failure." He turned and stormed out, the little bell on the diner door chiming mockingly. I sat there looking at my eggs and bacon. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the diner on me. I should have been crushed. I should have been in tears. He had just hurled the word at me that I had dreaded my entire life. Failure. But I didn't feel like a failure. I felt light. The immense weight that had been crushing my shoulders for as long as I could remember was suddenly gone. The weight of his expectations, the weight of my mother's disappointment, It had all vanished. He had thrown his most powerful punch, and I was still standing. Or, well, sitting. I picked up my fork and took a bite of my eggs. They were the best thing I had ever tasted. I finished my entire breakfast. I drank every last drop of my coffee. I left a $20 tip for the waitress. I walked out of that diner and into the bright sunlight. I got into my old, beat-up car, the one I'd bought with my internship money, and drove to my new apartment. It was a small, one-bedroom place near the airport. That night, I started my first shift. I walked into the operations center. It was a symphony of chaos. Phones ringing, people shouting, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and jet fuel. My boss, a gruff man named Sal, pointed to a desk. "You're here. Don't touch anything until I tell you to." I sat there for 2 hours. Then a call came in. A flight from Denver was being diverted because of a storm. They had to find a gate, reroute the passengers, and scramble a new crew. It was chaos, and I absolutely loved it. I grabbed a headset and started working. When my shift ended, I walked out of the terminal as the sun was rising. My feet ached. I was exhausted. I had spilled coffee all down my front. I stood on the tarmac and looked up at the sky. A plane was taking off, climbing into the pink and orange dawn. I took a deep breath of the jet fuel-scented air. For the first time in my life, I felt completely free. I was breathing jet fuel instead of expectation. My father was wrong. I wasn't a failure. I was finally truly myself. That first year was a special kind of hell, the beautiful, exhausting kind you only appreciate in hindsight. My existence was pared down to its essentials. My job at the regional airline ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. My apartment was a tiny box near the airport with paper-thin walls that let me listen to my neighbors' sitcoms whether I wanted to or not. But every inch of it was mine. Sleep was a luxury, snatched in 4-hour chunks between the end of my shift and the opening of the public library. I'd wake up in the afternoon, the sun already high in the sky, and my day would begin. With a thermos of cheap, strong coffee, I'd head to the library, find a secluded carrel, and lose myself in the glow of a public access computer screen. My old Apex Air file, once a secret dream, was now my life's work. I was building a blueprint, line by line, spreadsheet by spreadsheet. And from my parents? Nothing. I'd sent my mother a postcard once, with my new address scribbled on the back. The silence that followed was a verdict. The disappointment had been officially excommunicated from the Sterling brand. At work, I absorbed everything. I learned how to de-ice a wing in a blizzard, how to manage a crew schedule during a system-wide meltdown, how to calm down an irate passenger and an equally stressed-out pilot. I was invisible to my family, but at the airport I was seen. I was Ava, the one who got things done. After about 8 months, I met Lena Petrova. Lena was a maintenance supervisor, tough as nails, brilliant, and with zero patience for fools. She usually had a smudge of grease on her cheek and a fire in her eyes. She found me asleep in the break room one night, my head resting on a thick copy of FAA regulations. "You're the finance kid, right?" she said, her tone not unkind. "I'm in operations," I mumbled, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "Yeah, but you're the one who fixed Sal's scheduling grid. You get numbers. So why are you here, sleeping in a chair that smells like old cheese?" I was too tired to be anything but honest. "I'm saving money. I'm going to start my own company." Lena laughed. "Oh yeah? Doing what? Selling better airport coffee?" "A private jet company, a charter service." She stopped laughing. She looked at me, really looked at me, and saw the deep exhaustion and the unwavering determination in my eyes. "You're serious?" she said, more a statement than a question. I am. Well, she said, pulling up a chair, your projected fueling budget is going to eat you alive, and you're forgetting to factor in long-term hangar maintenance costs. That was the beginning. Lena Petrova became my first and only partner. She was the steel to my vision. I knew the logistics, she knew the machines. We were a perfect team. We worked at the airline for 2 more years, saving every single penny. We lived on cheap food and shared a tiny rented office space above a mechanic's garage with 1 folding desk and 2 wobbly chairs. I took my business plan to 20 different banks. They all said no. I was a 27-year-old woman with no collateral. My last name, once a key, was now a curse. Sterling. Any relation to Sterling Prestige? Why aren't you working for your father? I wanted to scream. The 21st Bank was a small community bank in a different county. The loan officer was a woman named Ms. Albright, who, it turned out, had been an aircraft mechanic in the Air Force. She read my plan from cover to cover. She studied Lena's maintenance cost projections. Luxury without arrogance, she read aloud from my mission statement. Precision without pretense. What does that mean? It means our clients are paying for safety and reliability, I said, not for a gold-plated sink. It means the jet is perfect, the crew is perfect, the schedule is perfect, the service is real, not a performance. Ms. Albright looked at me over the top of her glasses. You're Marcus Sterling's daughter. My heart sank. Yes, he's a fool, she said flatly. She approved our loan. It was small, barely enough to lease a single 10-year-old jet, but it was a start. We named our first plane the Corbin after my old professor. Apex Air was born. In the beginning, it was just me and Lena. I was the CEO, scheduler, janitor, and accountant. Lena was the COO, chief of maintenance, and the other janitor. Our first clients were small business owners, people who were turned off by the flashy, arrogant culture of the big jet companies. They liked our no-pretense model. They liked that the plane was always on time, that the coffee was hot, and that the crew genuinely seemed to care. Word of mouth is a powerful engine. We grew. 1 jet became 2, then 2 became 4. We hired pilots who, like us, cared about the work of flying. We hired flight attendants who were trained in safety first, service second. We built our company on the one thing my parents never understood: substance. Our reputation spread. We weren't the biggest, but we were the best. We became the go-to company for CEOs and high-profile clients who needed things to be perfect, no exceptions. I moved out of my tiny apartment. I bought a condo. I paid off my loan to Ms. Albright, with interest. And every time we hit a major milestone, I did something a little self-destructive. I sent a press release to my parents. When we acquired our 5th jet, when we were featured in Forbes as a rising star in aviation, when we won the industry award for safety and service, I'd mail the magazine or the press clipping to my old home address. I told myself it was to prove them wrong, but that was a lie. Deep down, I was still that little girl with the blue ribbon. I just wanted them to be proud. I just wanted them to say, "Good job, Ava." No reply ever came. Not a phone call, not a letter, not an email. The silence was absolute. I stood in my new office, a large glass room overlooking our hangar, holding that Forbes article in my hand. I had a 4-page spread. My parents had a small mention on page 82 for hosting a charity gala, and they still said nothing. That was the day the hurt finally curdled and hardened into fuel. Their silence wasn't a punishment anymore. It was a gift. It was freedom. They weren't just ignoring me. They were releasing me. They had cut the last invisible thread. I stopped looking for their approval. I stopped caring what they thought. I focused on my work, on my team, on the sky. Apex Air became my family. Lena was my sister. My pilots were my brothers. We were building the dream they had dismissed, and it was beautiful. My morning began at 5 a.m. I always loved the quiet of the hangar at dawn. I loved the smell of coffee brewing in the lounge, mingling with the faint, clean scent of jet fuel from the tarmac. I was 32 years old, and Apex Air was a success. We had a fleet of 12 jets and our own private terminal at the Chicago airfield. It wasn't the biggest terminal, but it was the best. It was built with substance, quiet lounges, lightning-fast Wi-Fi, the best coffee in the state, and the most efficient ground crew in the business. That morning, I was there to personally see off a new, very important client, Julian Croft. He was a tech billionaire, notoriously private, and known to despise the flashy, arrogant culture of our competitors. Lena had spent 6 months courting him, and he had finally agreed to a trial flight. This was it. I was in my uniform, a simple dark blue dress with a silver Apex Air pin on the lapel. My hair was tied back in a neat bun. I looked professional. I looked like I belonged. At 8:45 a.m., a black sedan glided to a stop. I walked to the door to greet my client. I was expecting Julian Croft, but the first 2 people to emerge from the car were my parents. I froze. I hadn't seen them in person in 7 years. They looked exactly the same. My father, Marcus, in a perfect, bespoke suit. My mother, Eleanor, in a cream-colored dress, her hair immaculate, her diamonds sparkling in the morning sun. They were laughing and holding champagne flutes, a luxury service offered by other terminals, one I had specifically banned for my clients. I served coffee. They didn't see me. They were walking alongside another man, Julian Croft. The air was sucked from my lungs. They were his consultants. Sterling prestige. Of course, they were managing his image, his travel, his life. I instinctively stepped back into a small alcove near the window, my heart pounding against my ribs. I watched them. My mother was in full performance mode, charming, elegant, and completely artificial. "Julian, you will adore this new jet company," she cooed. "Marcus and I have been vetting them. They say they are very precise." She said the word precise as if it were a quaint little hobby. Julian Croft looked around our terminal, and I saw a flicker of genuine appreciation in his eyes. "It's quiet. I like that. No noise, no chaos." "Yes," my father said, seamlessly taking credit for the very atmosphere. "We only recommend the absolute best for our clients." Then Julian Croft did the one thing I was not prepared for. He was just making small talk. He turned to my mother. "You and Marcus have built such an impressive legacy," he said kindly. "Are your children in the business with you?" My father's smile tightened at the edges, and my mother let out that small, sad laugh, the one I knew so well, the one she had used when I told her I wanted to be a pilot. "We have a daughter," she said, her voice dripping with pity. "But she's just a disappointment." I stopped breathing. "Oh," Julian said, looking uncomfortable. "Yes," my mother continued, walking toward the very window where I was hiding. She still didn't see me. "It's tragic, really. We gave her everything, the best schools, every opportunity, and she just threw it all away." "She works at an airport," my father added, his voice a low, regretful tone. "Just a job. She never really managed to go anywhere." "She works at an airport, a disappointment." The lie was so clean, so perfect. It protected their image and completely erased me. "That's a shame," Julian said, glancing at his watch. "It is," my mother said, "but we are so proud of what we've built." She turned away from the window, and that's when my father's client, Julian Croft, saw me. He had seen my picture. He had read the Forbes article. Lena had sent him our entire company profile. His eyes widened in recognition. "Ava," he said, his voice a mixture of surprise and confusion. "What are you—" My mother and father spun around. They saw me. My father's face went bone white. My mother's perfect smile froze and then crumbled. "Wait a minute," Julian said, a slow smile spreading across his own face. He looked from me to my parents and back again. "This is her company," he said. I stepped out of the alcove, keeping my voice calm and steady. "Hello, Mother. Father." My mother's hand had been perfectly steady until that exact moment. Her eyes were locked on mine, wide with a kind of terror I had never seen in them before, and the champagne flute slipped from her fingers. It fell to the marble floor and shattered. The sound was like a gunshot in the serene terminal. Champagne, glass, and lies exploded everywhere. My mother stared at the mess on the floor, then up at me. Her illusion of superiority, her perfect image, her polished world, it was all lying in sharp, broken pieces at her feet. The silence that filled the terminal was absolute. My mother's hand was still frozen in the air, empty. My father looked as if he'd been physically struck. Julian Croft was just looking at me with an impressed, deeply curious smile. One of my staff, a young woman named Maria, started to move forward with a dustpan. "I'll take care of that, Maria," I said, my voice calm. I didn't take my eyes off my parents. "Please just see to Mr. Croft's luggage. We're ready for him." I turned to Julian. "Mr. Croft, I apologize for this. I'm Ava Sterling. It's a pleasure to have you. Your flight is ready. Please, let me escort you to the jet." Julian nodded, his eyes twinkling. "The pleasure is all mine, Miss Sterling. A very impressive operation you have here." He knew. He had seen the whole thing. "Thank you, sir," I said. I started to walk toward the tarmac, and Julian fell into step beside me. Behind us, I heard my father's strained voice. "Eleanor, come." My parents followed us, trailing behind me like chastised children. We walked out onto the tarmac. The jet was waiting. It was our newest model, a Gulfstream G650, its engines humming with a quiet, powerful energy. My best pilot, Captain Evans, was at the door. "Good morning, Miss Sterling," he said with a crisp nod. "Good morning, Captain. This is Mr. Croft and his consultants, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling." My parents flinched when I called them that. Julian Croft boarded the jet. He stopped just inside, and I saw him run a hand over the polished dark wood of the bulkhead. The leather seats were a custom cream color. The air smelled of fresh coffee, not disinfectant. "This is magnificent," he said, his voice filled with genuine appreciation. "The attention to detail." "Thank you, sir," I said. "We designed the interiors ourselves." My parents boarded after him, moving slowly as if in a daze. My mother looked around the cabin, her eyes wide with disbelief. This single jet was worth more than her house. This one aircraft was worth more than their entire consulting firm. They sat down, and suddenly they looked small. Julian sat across from them. I remained standing in the aisle. "Mr. Croft," I said, "my team is ready. We have the flight plan you requested and the specific satellite Wi-Fi you need for your call. There is fresh coffee and the breakfast you asked for." "Thank you, Ava," he said, deliberately using my first name. This is beyond what your COO Lena described. It's perfect." My father cleared his throat, a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control. "Yes, well," he said, adjusting his tie. "We always knew our daughter had a head for business. She gets it from me, you know. We are very proud." He aimed his consulting smile at Julian. Julian Croft did not smile back. He looked at my father, then at my mother, then back at me. He turned to my father. "Marcus, with all due respect," Julian said, his voice quiet but firm, "I don't think you have any idea what your daughter has built." My father's smile evaporated. "I've been following her company for a year," Julian continued. "I know the story. I know she started this with one 10-year-old plane and 2 employees. I know she worked the night shift at a regional airline to fund it." He leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "She didn't get this from you, Marcus. She's a visionary. She built this from nothing. She built this in spite of you." The cabin was utterly silent. My mother looked like she was going to be physically ill. My father, he had no reply. He was speechless. For the first time in his life, Richard Anderson was at a complete loss for words. He had been demoted from a player to a passenger, and now he was just a passenger in my world, on my jet. I looked at my mother and father. They were the failures now. They were the disappointments. I should have felt a surge of triumph, a wave of elation, but I didn't. I just felt tired. I gave a small nod to Julian. "Have a safe flight, Mr. Croft." "I will, Ava, and I'll be calling you to discuss a long-term contract." "I look forward to it," I said. I turned and walked off the jet. I did not look back at my parents. I walked down the stairs and back onto the tarmac. I heard the solid thud and hiss as Captain Evans sealed the door. I stood there. I watched as my jet pushed back from the gate. I watched it taxi to the runway, and I watched it climb into the sky, carrying my parents away from me. Months passed. The contract with Julian Croft was signed, a massive deal that solidified Apex Air's position at the top of the industry. I was in a meeting reviewing quarterly fuel cost analyses when an email popped up. It was from a personal account I didn't recognize, but the name was my father's. I hadn't heard from him in almost a decade. The subject line was just one word: Ava. I opened it. The email was short. "Ava, your mother and I would like to talk. When you're ready, Dad." He hadn't signed it Marcus. He had signed it Dad. I stared at the word. It looked alien on the screen. I didn't reply for 3 days. I went to Lena. "What do I do?" I asked, showing her the email. "What do you want to do?" she asked, not looking up from a maintenance log she was reviewing. "I don't know." "Yes, you do," she said, finally meeting my gaze. "You're just scared. Are you scared of them? Or are you scared of what you might finally say to them?" I thought about it. I wasn't scared of them anymore. I wrote back, "I can meet at 10 a.m. on Saturday, the cafe on Bishop Avenue." I chose it for a reason. It wasn't my old diner, that was my past. It wasn't their country club, that was their world. It was a new place, neutral ground. I arrived at the cafe at 9:55 a.m. They were already there, sitting at a small table in a quiet corner. They looked old. It was the first time I had ever thought that about them. My father's suit was, as always, perfect, but he looked weary. My mother wasn't wearing her usual diamonds, just a simple blouse. She looked small. I sat down. "Hello," I said. "Ava," my father said, his voice hoarse. The waitress came, we all ordered coffee, and then we sat in an awkward silence, the sound of the coffee grinder filling the void. My father spoke first. "We saw the article in Forbes," he said. I waited. "We saw all of them," my mother whispered, her gaze fixed on her lap. "All the press clippings you sent." I stared at her. "You saw them?" "Yes," she said. I put them in a drawer." My father looked at me, his eyes filled with something I had never seen before. Shame. "Ava, We didn't understand. We didn't see. We were so focused on our world, on our name, on image. He wasn't lecturing. He was confessing. We thought you were throwing your life away, he said. We thought you were a failure. There was that word again, the one he had used as a weapon in the diner. And now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Now, my father said, his voice heavy. We know we were the failures. I didn't know what to say to that. My mother began to cry. Not the loud performative sobs she used to garner sympathy, but quiet, genuine, heartbreaking tears. I was so embarrassed, she said, her voice breaking. I was embarrassed that you didn't want the life I had planned for you, that you didn't want to be like me. I thought if you rejected our world, you were rejecting me. She looked up at me, her face wet with tears. And when I saw you in that terminal, you were so strong, so whole, and you didn't need us. You hadn't needed us for a very long time, and I was still lying. I was still calling my successful, brilliant daughter a disappointment. Oh, God. She covered her face with her hands. My father reached across the table, but he didn't touch me. He just laid his hand flat on the wood, an offering. It is an imperfect apology, Ava, and it is far too late, I know that. We were not good parents. We were good consultants, but we were terrible parents. I looked at them, the two people who had built my cage, and I didn't feel the old anger. I just felt a profound sadness. Sad for the years we had lost. Sad for the little girl who just wanted someone to be proud of her blue ribbon. I know, I said. The waitress brought our coffees. We drank in silence for a moment. Your company is amazing, Ava, my father said finally. Apex Air. It's a good name. Thank you, I said. We talked. For the first time in our lives, we actually talked. They asked about Lena. They asked about the G650. I told them about Professor Corbin. They didn't lecture. They listened. After an hour, I looked at my watch. I have to go. I have a meeting. Of course, my father said, standing up. My mother stood as well. We were outside on the sidewalk. It was a bright, sunny day. The moment was awkward. My mother reached out as if to hug me, then stopped herself. Ava, she said, can you ever forgive us? I looked at her, then at my father. I thought about all the years of silence, all the hurt, the deep ache of being invisible. I already have, I said. They looked confused. I forgave you a long time ago, I explained softly. Not for you, for me. I had to. I couldn't build my company and hate you at the same time. I had to let you go. My mother nodded, fresh tears welling in her eyes. I understand. I turned and walked away. I did not look back. I had forgiven them, but that didn't mean I had to let them back in. Forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about me. It was about putting down the heavy weight of my past so I could be free to fly. It was closure. It was imperfect. It was real. And it was enough. It was evening. I was back where I belonged. Not in a cafe, not in a boardroom, but in the hangar. The sun was setting, painting the Chicago sky in brilliant shades of deep purple and fiery orange. The light streamed through the massive hangar windows, casting long shadows of my jets across the polished concrete floor. They were resting, clean, quiet, and powerful, ready. I stood by the window, a cup of coffee in my hand. It was just me and the machines. I heard footsteps and knew it was Lena. She came and stood next to me, silent for a moment before handing me a tablet. The new manifest for the Croft contract, she said. He's adding 3 more international routes. Good, I said, not even looking at it. We stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sky darken. So, she said finally. How was it? Coffee with the ghosts of Christmas past? I smiled. It was quiet. Are they fixed? She asked. No, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. But I am. Lena nodded. She understood. She had been my family when I had none. She was the sister I had chosen. Our friendship was built on steel and jet fuel, not on appearances. You built this, Ava, she said, gesturing to the hangar and the fleet within. All of it, without them. We built this, I corrected her. Yeah, well, she said, bumping my shoulder with hers. You were the one crazy enough to think we could. She left me there with my thoughts. I turned back to the window. A jet from another company was taking off from the main runway, a silver arrow rising into the dusk. I saw my reflection in the glass. I saw a woman, not a girl. I wasn't the child in the itchy white dress, looking at a plane for the first time. I wasn't the student hiding magazines under her mattress. I wasn't a prop. I wasn't a brand extension. I was calm. I was steady. I was whole. My parents had tried to write my story. They had tried to cast me as the failed daughter, but I had taken the pen from their hands. I had written my own story. I had written it in operations logs and bank loans, in business plans and in the contrails of my own jets streaking across the sky. I thought about my mother's belated apology and my father's sad confession. It was good that it happened. It was a kind of closure, but it didn't change anything fundamental. I didn't need their apology to be whole. I didn't need their permission to be successful. I didn't need their approval to be happy. I had built my own approval. I had earned it. I whispered the words to my own reflection in the darkening glass. They called me a failure. I watched as the last sliver of sun disappeared and the runway lights began to glow like a string of pearls. But my failure built an empire in the sky, a place their approval could never reach. The sky was dark now, full of stars. The first flight of the night was getting ready. I could hear the low, beautiful thunder of the engines starting up. It was my sound. It was my world. The sky was finally, completely, and irrevocably mine.